Kerr.
Yet, if he should give up what he has begun, seeking to make us or our kingdom subject to the King of England or the English, we should exert ourselves at once to drive him out as our enemy and subverter of his own right and ours, and make some other man who was well able to defend us our king. I probably need offer no explanation to you, Presiding Officer, but those are words from the Declaration of Arbroath of 1320. And the words our exertion, well, our vote, to me, is our exertion of this day. And the ballot box allows every one of us the privilege of expressing our view on the direction of travel that we wish our nation to take. But, referring back to the quote, history has taught us that defining the defence of the nation and our freedom as resting upon solely the shoulders of one chosen individual and one ideology is fraught with danger. Our democracy is rules-based and rests on an accommodation between differing interests, and that is what a healthy democracy promotes. And that's what this Parliament should promote. Its practices and procedures should facilitate it. Now, as if we need any reminder of the importance of defending our democratic traditions and practices, dare I remind the Chamber that Monday of this week was the 90th anniversary of the coming to power of Adolf Hitler as the Chancellor of Germany. And I mention this because it's always good to be reminded of the fragility of our democratic institutions and practices. We should not consider ourselves to be unassailable, and we should not become complacent. We cannot afford complacency about what we should rightly regard as our birthright. We must all be willing to defend our democracy from the threat of people who seek to ignore or sideline the democratic process. And that is why I agree with my colleague who spoke earlier when he described the importance of us all taking a close interest in updating and revitalising our electoral process. Because freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom to engage in the democratic process without fear or favour is something to which we should have a total and uncompromising commitment. Of course I will.
Alistair Rowlett.
I thank the member for giving way, and I appreciate and agree with the points he makes about the importance of defending democracy and how it's our birthright. Can he understand, and I ask this honestly, can he understand the reaction that is likely to be from people who do not have passports and who do not have driving licences, who turn up in future, at the next UK general election, to be told they do not enjoy such a birthright?
Well, I never have any concern about whether or not Alistair Allen is making his point honestly and sincerely. But I believe that there is a number of ways in which voters can obtain, for no charge, an appropriate identification that they can use at a UK general election. So I have no concerns whatsoever about that. I'm glad he agrees with me about the importance of us defending in an uncompromising way our democracy. But I think that that defence of democracy involves us being prepared to look at updating these democratic processes. And that's why I, along with Donald Cameron, welcome this consultation from the government on electoral reform. There's a lot to consider in the government's consultation. And I'm afraid that I couldn't even begin in the time that I thought I'd allocate. If I'd known we were going to have so much time, I would have perhaps come with a list of things, and I'm sure I could look through the document and come up with things. But to properly address everything, because it is a very packed document. And by the way, congratulations to the Minister on a very arresting picture at the beginning of the document, which I'm sure everyone will have noticed. My old sparring partner, the Minister. So I can't address all of the issues that are raised in the document, but I do want to talk about some overarching. It is a compliment. The Minister says he's not sure if it's a compliment. It is a compliment. And I wasn't using arresting as any sort of a pun when I said he had an arresting picture. But our democracy needs good people, men and women, to stand for public office. And, Presiding Officer, that is That is what I would like to major my remarks on in the context of the consultation paper. And because right now in Scotland, many good people, many qualified people, would never consider putting themselves forward for public office. Because people say to me, and I'm sure, and I'd wager that people say to many of you, my colleagues in this chamber, why would you want to be a politician? Why would you want to put yourself through all that? Why would you want to put your family through all that? And then there's the old canard that someone who wants to be a politician should be banned from ever being able to be one, etc. The underpinning aspect of this consultation is about engagement, and engaging people to make it easy for them to become candidates and to actively engage in the democratic processes, local and national, and engaging all of our fellow Scots to make our democracy accessible to them and to have the opportunity of voting made available to them. That's what this document's all about, to all of them. And many good people who have a desire to stand for election in our nation would refuse it and are refusing to do so because of intimidation. Many voters are turned off by the viciousness and the vitriol. They don't engage in the discussion for fear of retribution. Now, it'd be easy for us to blame this on social media. But it's not just a social media phenomena, I can tell you. And we would be kidding ourselves if we think that this is something limited to the virtual sphere. Yes, of course.
Minister. Again, it's similar to the intervention made in Mr Rennie. Is it not down to ourselves in this place as well to show leadership in that, and how we conduct ourselves within this chamber and how we interact with one another? Today's debate is a perfect example of how members of the public would probably want to see us interact with each other instead of the usual argy-bargy that we tend to have.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, I don't think... Well, I respect the fact that some of his party members applaud that. I don't applaud that, because in fact, debate and robust debate is absolutely central to the functioning of a vital democracy. Where we go wrong in Scotland increasingly is that our politics has become nasty. Now, it's quite possible for there to be a full-on battle of ideas, as there often is in this chamber, but without the nastiness. There is no way on this planet that because I disagree with Graham Day, that somehow Graham Day is my enemy. We've got to take this out of our politics, and there's too much of that in our politics today. And I might identify, for example... Yes, of course.
Fiona Hislop.
Awareness is very important in politics, so perhaps Mr Kerr might reflect on this, not just today in his speech, but in his contributions as we go forward in future debates.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, I think this is an example, actually, of what I've just been talking about. If you're a member of this Parliament and you cannot stand up to the robust presentation of someone's views that you disagree with, then, my goodness me, have you chosen the right path by being here? I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm afraid that intervention on its own stands some merit of study, because that is exactly what's wrong with our politics. Yes, of course.
Emma Harper.
Thanks, Stephen Kerr, for giving way. I think one of the things that we do need to be cognizant of in this chamber is the language that we use, that is respectful and very carefully constructed to convey respect for our colleagues. Would you agree with that? We need to use respectful language across this chamber.
And we need to speak through the chair.
Absolutely. But on no account should that mean or become a byword for us having to agree with each other. I mean, the people of Scotland don't send us here to agree with each other. They know full well that they're voting for us because of the views we hold that are replicated by what they believe. And they would expect us to stand up for those things when we speak in this chamber. And so the idea that somehow the only way that this Parliament functions or our democracy flourishes is by us all being agreeing, I'm afraid, is a busted flush. That's not going to work. What works is when we can have a full-on debate about ideas that we profoundly disagree with each other on without the personal vitriol and nastiness. It is just not required. And I'm afraid that from my point of view, and maybe I'm beginning to test the presiding officer's patience on time, and I've got so much more to say, of course, but I mean, an example of this, and I will draw on the experience that many of us have had on this side of this chamber. When you see political banners that say, Tory scum out, or England get out of Scotland, it's difficult to read those banners in any other way than they are intended to harass and to bully opponents. Now, anyone who stands behind such a banner seeks not to engage with issues or have a debate robustly and settle it with a vote. They stand behind those banners because they wish to cause intimidation and fear. And such a thing is bigotry. And it has no place in modern Scotland.
Briefly, because it's a very interesting debate, but I think we need to probably get back to the topic.
I beg your pardon, Presiding Officer. I don't disagree with the member's assessment of some of the banners he mentions. But just in the interests of completeness, he will, of course, be aware that many of us on this side of that particular debate experience bigotry and intimidation from people of an extreme on the other side of this debate too.
Stephen Kerr.
I'm not disputing that, and that's why I said I was going to relate it into the context of the people that sit on this side of the chamber. But if we can all agree that this sort of thing is the thing that we should all condemn and all stand against, then that is progress in the context of the atmosphere, the environment in which politics is conducted in Scotland. Now, I'm not going to make my way through my speech, which is surprising because I thought we had, at least half an hour in hand. But there we go. I'm obviously not getting into half an hour. But Presiding Officer, I would just conclude by saying there is a growing number of people in our country who are the don't knows. And when pushed, it isn't that they don't know. It's that they prefer not to say because they don't want hassle. And that should be something that concerns all of us. Beyond the negative political culture, there are other issues which I think are dissuading people who want to be part of the change that they believe Scotland needs to see, but they don't put themselves forward. I will save those comments for another speech on another occasion, if I can ingratiate myself with my party's chief whip. But I think that the issues in this document do deserve careful thought and consideration, and especially around the idea of throwing 16 and 17-year-olds into what I've been describing. I do believe that we have a duty of care, that we have got a safeguarding responsibility for 16 and 17-year-olds. And, Presiding Officer, in conclusion, you'll be pleased to hear, election reform is vitally important. But let's not kid ourselves on that election reform in the context of the chapters and headings in the Minister's consultation paper alone will improve participation in the democratic process or change the culture of politics in Scotland that I detect we would all like to see.